The design on my tie is by an artist from the Tsimshian Nation. My cufflinks are made by a Haida artist. I don't reside in BC, but I'm here an awfully lot because of the leadership of the series and the foundation. And when I get off the plane in Vancouver, I smile. I honestly smile. And the closer I get to the ocean, I smile more. This province is remarkably beautiful. And it is my absolute pleasure to now welcome Premier Christy Clarke, who will talk about beautiful BC in the only way she can, beautifully. Premier Clarke.
Thanks, everybody. I'm delighted to be here. Welcome to the rainforest, or just the rain. For those of you who are from sunnier places, we're just delighted to have you all back. We know you come every second year and you make such a difference for Vancouver and for British Columbia. Thank you, Prime Minister Trudeau, for bringing premiers together today and the next couple of days where we'll really tackle some of the issues with climate. To my fellow colleagues, the First Ministers, thank you for joining us. Mayor Robertson and federal cabinet ministers, thank you. I'm really delighted that you're all here. And I won't begin without offering a special thank you as well to the Tsleil-Waututh, the Squamish, and the Musqueam First Nations for welcoming us so warmly onto their traditional territory. So we all come together here every 2 years to talk about how we can tackle climate change. And I feel like we are at a unique moment in our history where we have a chance not just to try and tackle it, but to try and really beat it. And all of the premiers and the Prime Minister are here to join you in that on this day after Super Tuesday. The Economist called it Super Scary Tuesday. Because what we want to talk about at Globe and what you've always focused on is how do we grow our economies in the right way for the country? How do we and for the world, how do we put the right policies in place that are going to make a difference? How do we encourage innovation and technical advances that are going to both build wealth, create economic growth and jobs, at the same time that we protect the world in which we live? And I want to talk about that in just a moment. But let me be a little bit of a homer here and say that I don't think that there is any place better than British Columbia where we can talk about tackling the world's greatest challenge. And right here in British Columbia today, we have the strongest economy in the country. We have the highest, and at the same time, we have the highest, most broadly applied carbon tax in North America. It's $30 a ton. It covers 80% of our economy. We have defied the skeptics who said it was going to wreck jobs and slow the economy because we've continued to grow. And that's been because what we've done is we've made our tax absolutely revenue neutral. And we've been doing it, if people say that it doesn't work, we've been doing it, by the way, for 8 years in British Columbia. And I want to give you an example of, because we talk a lot in British Columbia about getting to yes. How do we find ways, set out a path, rather than trying to figure out how we can always say no to everything, to try and figure out how we can create a path to get to yes, one that respects the rights and needs of First Nations peoples, one that ensures we're protecting our environment, one that creates jobs, one that creates benefits to creating a fair society in our province. And as we do that, one of the things that I've learned is you can't be afraid. And the best example that I have of that is, and all the British Columbians will be familiar with this, all of us once or twice or a bunch of times in the cold parts of the year decide we're going to jump in the ocean. And you jump into the freezing cold ocean, and that moment when you're just about to get in, you decide at the last minute you're not going to, but you do it anyway. And then you get in and the water's dark, and you think, all those animals have a significant tactical advantage over me, and I don't know what's underneath me in the water. But you keep going. And that's kind of the British Columbia way. It's really part of the DNA that we've developed here. It's a willingness to be brave and sometimes jump into the cold water, not always knowing what it's going to bring, but trying to do it because we feel like it's the right thing for us to do. And in British Columbia, we have very much built all of our wealth on the treasures of this place, on our resources and our people. And we understand that we need to be stewards of the magnificent landscape and ecology that you see around us. And we need to do that because we want to make sure that this is a better place for our kids, better than the one that we found. And so yesterday, we introduced legislation to protect the world's largest intact temperate rainforest, the Great Bear Rainforest, the only one of its kind left on the globe. 85% of that area will be set aside from development. It is an area larger than Ireland, by the way, and it will be used, the remaining 15% will be used for the people who have lived off the land there for millennia. They will be, that will be reserved for their economic development opportunities so that First Nations in those communities will have a chance to benefit. And it's the culmination of decades of work from people, amongst people who at times have found themselves in absolutely violent disagreement. Environmental organizations, First Nations, industry, government. But over 10 years, we worked through in a spirit of trying to get to yes, recognizing how important it was that we get there. And that patience and that focus helped us get to this landmark agreement for the country and for the world. And we did it because it's the right thing to do. But we also did it because we know that in British Columbia, it's also very good business. It's what we're known for around the world. And I would like to argue that this balance between good business and doing the right thing for the environment is really part of British Columbia's core advantage. If you buy what British Columbia sells, whether it's steak, whether it's cherries, whether it's apples, whether it's natural gas, whether it's metallurgical coal, whether it's LNG, you know it will be produced in the cleanest possible way of any of those kinds of products you can find anywhere in the world. And when we went to Paris together, we all took away some lessons, and I want to tell you one of the lessons that I took away. It's that the world, including our largest and most important trading partners, the United States, China, India, Japan, South Korea, all are working hard to try and get off their addiction to carbon. And my job is to make sure, of course, that we're creating jobs and economic growth in British Columbia. I know that that's the most important thing that people are looking for from leaders in Canada today. But I also want to make sure that those opportunities aren't short-term. I want to make sure that those are opportunities that exist for people in 25 and 50 and 100 years. And so here we are at this unique moment where China and India are lifting millions of people out of poverty. 200 million people lifted out of poverty in the last 3 years. And we have the chance in the Western world and in Canada to help them get off dirty fuels, to help them get off coal. We can be the ones that provide them with the alternatives for renewables, for technology, energy innovation, clean liquefied natural gas, alternatives that will help them ensure that as they grow and become more wealthy, they do it in a better way than we did, as our economies have grown over the last several centuries. But I also know we have to get it right here at home. We have the first, and I think, to my knowledge, the only carbon-neutral government anywhere in North America, and we've had that for the last 5 years. We have our experience over the last 8 years with our revenue-neutral carbon tax at $30 a ton. That has allowed us to reduce our emissions faster than anywhere else in the country at the same time that our population and our economy has grown. But finally, in this last year, our emissions have started to creep up again. And so we have appointed a climate leadership team, respected environmentalists, leaders in industry, to sit down and think about what we need to do as our next steps to make sure we continue to grow our economy while we protect our environment. And they've given us some strong recommendations. We're consulting with the public on them now, and we're giving them very close consideration. We want to look at how we can lower emissions from industries without harming jobs. We want to look at the built environment. We want to look at transportation emissions. And we're also been recommended that we raise the carbon tax. So I want to talk to you about the carbon tax for just a second, because I believe that there will always be upward pressure. Even when you're the biggest carbon tax in North America, there will still be pressure to grow it. And it is a necessary part of our debate as we talk about what we want to do to manage environmental, to try and fight climate change. But with the weakness in the global economy today, we also as governments have an obligation to respect the fact that families are feeling profoundly burdened. And I believe that the last thing governments should do is add to that tax burden. So the core principle for me is this: there cannot be any increase in the carbon tax without also tax relief for families and individuals. We have to protect those jobs and the families and the citizens that depend on those jobs. That's why the carbon tax has been so successful. It is proof that protecting our planet does not have to come at an economic cost broadly across the economy and for individuals in their pocketbooks as well. We tax what we don't want, which is pollution, and then we try and remove taxes from the things that we do want: money in people's pockets, a growing economy, wealth creation, jobs. And that is consistent with the advice that we receive from our climate leadership team. In BC, we believe that carbon pricing means taxing people differently, not taxing people more, because we believe that in order to build a consensus, a societal consensus, in support of environmental protection, we need to make sure that those changes we make will make people richer rather than making people poorer. But I think we all know that carbon tax and carbon pricing is only part of the solution for the country and for the world. We also need technological breakthroughs. We need some real game changers that are going to allow us to make some leaps. So we've done a number of things on that front. At the end of 2015, we announced a $100 million tech fund, part of what we hope is going to make British Columbia a tech hub for the world. I've already talked about the role that LNG can play as a transitional fuel for those growing economies in China and India so that they can get off coal. And so we have set, though, we want to make sure that the LNG that we send overseas is indeed the cleanest in the world. So we've set the benchmark for the cleanest facilities comparatively all around the globe. And we are looking at upstream emissions as well, looking at carbon dioxide, looking at methane. We're moving on electrification, particularly in the upstream, so that we can reduce carbon dioxide emissions. And we already have the most stringent regulations in the country on venting and flaring. And so today, I want you to know that we're also working with industry on reaching out to our neighbours across the Rockies in Alberta to align our policies on reducing methane emissions and making sure that we are as coordinated as possible with the best environmental regulations in the west of Canada together. Now in Paris, British Columbia became the 14th jurisdiction to join the International Zero Emission Vehicle Alliance. As you know, that's pledging to make sure that all passenger vehicles are emissions-free by 2050. BC already has the largest public charging network in Canada. We have the second highest electric car adoption in the country as well. And we've invested $31 million in subsidies so that buyers can afford low-emission vehicles, electric or hydrogen fuel cell. That is money that's come from our Clean Energy Fund, and we're going to be adding another $7 million to that because we now need more charging and refilling stations. We need more price incentives, and we need a new program to encourage fleet operators to go green as well. And we are targeting that fund now to support people who are buying electric vehicles under $77,000, because it's my view that they're the ones that need the help the most. And this should put about 50% more electric and hydrogen cell vehicles on the road in our province, and it will help us reduce greenhouse gas emissions by about 250,000 tonnes over the next 15 years. And we also want to start giving HOV, we want to give electric vehicle drivers the green light to go in the HOV lane. So no matter how many people you have in your car, even if it's just one, you are going to now be in British Columbia, be allowed to drive in the high occupancy vehicle lanes. I now know which of you are British Columbians and drive electric cars. And you'll be able to, it doesn't have an HOV lane, but the fantastic new Sea to Sky Highway will allow you to zip up to the place that Zia talked about, the air-to-fuel plant. Government's supporting it with a $3.75 million investment in their design and construction. And as she said, they are sucking carbon out of the air and they are turning that into gasoline or diesel. Can you imagine a future where that technology has taken root and become economic? We're also going to make sure that our resource sector remains amongst the cleanest and most sustainable in the world, in particular in mining. A company called Saltworks is in Vancouver. We're supporting them to help them clean the contaminated mining water of nitrates, of calcium sulfate, so that we can again lead the world. And that if you're using British Columbia products, whether it's copper or gold, if it comes from a mine in British Columbia, you know it's the cleanest product you can get anywhere in the world. So last, let me say this. Carbon pricing is a very effective way, and we've learned that in British Columbia, to change the way people live. It's a pure price signal here in our province that affects the way people make their choices, and we've seen that over 8 years. The empirical evidence is indisputable. But we also know that we have to do a lot more in innovation and more investment in technology. We must address our built environment. We must invest in alternatives to cars, in rapid transit and low emissions vehicles. And we must do all of this not just because it's good business. We should do it because it's the right thing to do. Technology, resources, jobs, economic growth, all of those things I think of as ways that we imagine who we want to be, what we want to become. But I think that we have to do that, all of those things, in a way that respects who we are. The Great Bear Rainforest, 7% of the land mass of British Columbia. It has been set aside for those ancient trees, for those endangered frogs, for those millennia-old cultures and communities, for those unique white bears that exist nowhere else in the world. We have set that aside because it's who we are. And in all of the change around us, in all of the things that we want to do, all the growth we want to see happen, all the things we want to become, I think the most important thing is we should never, ever forget that in Canada, in British Columbia, this is who we are. Thank you.